Good morning and welcome to 16.3. Now, what you should do right now, if you haven't done so, is you need to watch those two Brain Pop videos on nuclear energy and radiation. If you haven't done so, stop this video and go watch those videos and then answer the question that's in Google Classroom. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read 16.3. You can go to TCI, I would. Pause this video, go to 16.3 so you can read along with me and take a look at the maps and charts and everything to kind of help out with what's going on. This is not mandatory, but I would recommend it because I'm going to stop and give some kind of perspective of what's going on in the Soviet Union in 1986. Okay, here we go. The Chernobyl radiation accident. This is 16.3. At 1:24 a.m. on April 25th, 1986, an explosion rocked the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. A fireball of radioactive dust rose 3 miles into the air. Soon the radioactive cloud rode the winds to places thousands of miles away. A terrible accident at a single power plant became a matter of concern for the entire world. So what you should have an understanding about is, well, you probably don't know this, is that the Soviet Union was a very close society. They didn't share a lot of information that happened around the world, especially if you made a major accident. So they're not the ones that reported this. And if you remember, if you go back to 16.1, okay, here's a map of Europe, and you can see where the Ukraine is with the red arrow, and you can see where Sweden is with the green arrow. So they're not right next to each other. In fact, they're a distance away. That explosion of 3 miles up in the atmosphere, that wind blew it right over to Sweden and a lot of other places. It was Sweden. At one of their plants, they were checking things with what's called a Geiger counter, and they were looking for radiation. It does a lot of ticking when you get closer to something that's radioactive. And sure enough, there was radiation at the plant. People had it on their bodies because when workers walk into the building, they check for radiation, and then they check for radiation when they leave. And if people have radiation on them, there must be a leak at the nuclear power plant in Sweden. Well, they checked twice and 3 times, and they couldn't find any radiation. So it wasn't coming from their plant. Where was it coming from? And it took a while, but finally, the Soviet Union admitted that they made a mistake and they had an accident. Anyway, let's go back to the reading. Human error creates a deadly radiation leak. The Chernobyl nuclear power plant lies near the city of Kiev in Ukraine. At that time, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Ukraine later became independent after the breakup of the Soviet Union into 15 separate countries. Chernobyl was one of hundreds of nuclear power plants operating in about 30 countries. In fact, if you didn't know this, Minnesota, we have 2 nuclear power plants, one up by Monticello, and the other one is by Red Wing. If you know where Treasure Island Casino is, if you've ever heard of it, it's on the Indian reservation that's right there, and it's on the Mississippi River. These plants use uranium for fuel. Uranium is mined from the ground like coal or copper. Then it is put into a special container called a nuclear reactor. Inside the reactor, the uranium gives off energy in the form of heat. This heat is used to boil water to create steam, and the steam powers a turbine to produce electricity. During Chernobyl accident, one of the reactors got too hot to control. This accident did not just happen. It occurred when workers doing a routine check failed to follow their own safety rules. As a result, an explosion blasted through the reactor. The explosion started a fire that quickly raged out of control. But the biggest problem was not the fire, it was the huge cloud that formed over Chernobyl after the explosion. This cloud was made up of deadly radioactive dust. The radioactive cloud spreads across Europe. The radioactive cloud did not remain over Chernobyl for long. Winds sent it north towards Sweden and then south towards Central Europe. Radiation also moved east across Asia, eventually crossed the Pacific to reach the United States. That's on the other side of the planet. That's how deadly this stuff is. And while I'm kind of reading this, you should be able to take a look at that photograph that's over on this side, or the map that's on the side that has the different radiation. While you're looking at these maps, pay special attention to the date up in the upper left corner. That was April 26th before. Now we have April 30th, and now we'll go into May 4th. And you can see that it depends on where the winds are at. They always change how it's spreading. Countries close to the disaster suffered the most. The hardest hit was Belarus, which borders Ukraine to the north. About 70% of the radioactive dust from Chernobyl fell on Belarus. The dust contaminated soil and water. As a result, the people of Belarus eat, drink, and breathe radiation every day. Yep, even today in 2020. It's not safe to be there. But people don't have a lot of money and they don't have a lot of choice. This has led to higher rates of cancer among Belarusians. The people of Lapland also suffered. Lapland is the area in the far north of Europe, including parts of Sweden. Many people here fish for a living. Others raise herds of reindeer. After the Chernobyl accident, radiation polluted their fishing grounds and reindeer herds. Many animals died. Those that survived were not safe to eat. And you have to understand that when you're up in the very northern part of Europe, and you should know that the population density is super, super low. There are no grocery stores. There's no place to get other foods. And if your family's been doing this for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and that's how you've lived, this is a big change. It's a big change. And it happened like far away. Far away. Efforts to reduce radioactive pollution. At first, the Soviet government denied that there had been an accident, but the Swedish scientists raised alarms about the rising radiation levels. Finally, an announcement was made on Soviet television. An accident was taking place at the Chernobyl power plant, and one of the reactors was damaged. Measures are being taken to eliminate the consequences of the accident. Those affected by it are being given assistance. The government sent an army of engineers into Chernobyl. Over the next few weeks, they built a huge concrete box around the damaged reactor. This giant tomb will have to remain in place until the reactor is no longer dangerously radioactive. That will not be for more than 100 years. The Soviet government moved people living closest to the plant to safer areas. About 135,000 people had to leave their homes. So when they had to leave their homes, they had to leave everything. They were told at first that, yeah, that's okay. You're gonna leave for a little bit and you'll be able to come back. Nope. They pretty much packed a suitcase for about a week and they were never able to return. So we'll come back to that later on because there's literally ghost towns in this area where there's big, huge apartment buildings and nobody lives there. Schools are abandoned, amusement parks, stores, shopping centers, streets. It's kind of crazy. Often they had no warning. Rescue workers suddenly appeared looking like spacemen in protective clothes. The workers hurried residents onto buses. Workers also destroyed contaminated crops, food, and animals. Despite these efforts, thousands of people eventually died in Ukraine from health problems caused by radiation. Chernobyl was the world's worst nuclear accident. We'll see. We'll have to talk about what happened at Fukushima in Japan after a tsunami that happened, I think it was in 2011. Since then, great attention has been paid to improving safety at nuclear power plants. Reactors have been changed to make them less likely to overheat. Other improvements make it easier to shut down reactors in emergencies. These efforts reduce the chance that accidents at power plants will cause major radiation pollution. Okay, so what I want you to do is you've got the, down below, you will have the interactive notebook, and it says complete the map below and follow these directions. Follow it step by step. You can use the different tools that are there. You can use arrows, you can use circles. Use the transparency slide, which is a bunch of circles that are different shades. Make sure that your arrow is highlighted, and then you can slide it back and forth.